It started with a ripple, but soon became waves.
It starts with the opioid epidemic and the pain pill push by pharmaceutical companies, medical institutions, and doctors feeling the pressure to solve our pain.
The next wave was heroin addiction among those who became addicted to pain medication. Sam Quiones is author of Dreamland, the true tale of the opioid epidemic.
So pain pills, the underworld figures out that this is a growing market now. Heroin, for the first time in 20 years in America, is a growing market. They begin to respond.
A third wave? Fentanyl and more potent synthetic analogs in the illegal drug supply chain.
All across the country, fentanyl is replacing heroin. And now the problem is, too, people are addicted to fentanyl. Heroin would not do the trick, would not keep the withdrawal symptoms at bay for someone who's addicted to fentanyl. So they need fentanyl now, not heroin.
And now a fourth wave, people overdosing and dying from fentanyl-contaminated drugs. This, according to Sam in his new release, The Least of Us, True Tales of America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth.
So really we're in the fourth stage, in my opinion, of what started as an opioid epidemic, and really it's better to characterize it as just an epidemic of addiction and drug abuse.
We're seeing more and more people who are mistakenly taking an opiate. They think they're taking cocaine or they think they're taking meth. So they think they're taking a drug that they've historically been able to deal with, and now it's something different.
People who take opioids are at risk of developing addiction or substance use disorder, which is defined as a craving for the drug and continued use despite harmful consequences. Opioids are highly addictive, in large part because they activate the powerful reward center of the brain. One very powerful consequence of addiction is overdose and death. In fact, in 2010, the Lucas County Coroner's Office reported 8 opioid deaths. In 3 years, they increased tenfold. That number quadrupled by 2017, when 365 people died of opioid overdose. In 2020, there were 556 opioid deaths in the 21 counties served by the Lucas County Coroner. Of those 556 deaths, 296 were in Lucas County, a number that more than tripled since 2014. And in 2020, for the first time since these statistics have been kept, in a single calendar year, over 100,000 people in the United States died of drug overdose. It was a rough year in many ways. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the state of Ohio and much of the nation was ordered to stay at home. Businesses closed their doors. People stayed inside theirs.
The pandemic helped recreate a lot of the conditions that led to the opioid epidemic. Isolation, lack of jobs, lack of community and inability to kind of function.
Isolation set in, and addiction thrives in isolation, its natural habitat. Lieutenant Zach Reed is the EMS supervisor for the Toledo Fire and Rescue Department.
We've had an opportunity to take part in some opiate town halls, and one of the things that I took away that was very powerful was several people stood up and said how isolation really compounds the problem of addiction. And to make the correlation between isolation, services provided, and then run volume, I think is a very good case, because during the COVID-19 isolation period, our overdose incidents went up over 40% from the year prior.
Our numbers at Cherry Street have increased steadily over the last year and a half. I think it's really hard to break things apart and say exactly what it's about, but my intuition says that is COVID related. It has everything to do with the eviction moratorium being lifted, the incidences of individuals who lost their jobs because of the pandemic. We have people who are living here with us today who actually have apartments, but are so lonely they can't stand it. And so they stay with us instead of alone at home. And so, the number of people really reaching out in desperation for relationship is really an important fact of what has come about, at least this summer. So addiction and homelessness and mental illness go hand in hand.
Alexandria Thomas manages the Wellness and Recovery Center of Neighborhood Properties, a place of respite for people struggling with any number of crises.
So when somebody is struggling with substance use challenges, and when they're new in recovery, or maybe seasoned in recovery and they have years under their belt, one of the main things that helped them to get to a place of recovery or a healthy space with their journey was community. So the pandemic had really it made it challenging for individuals that turn to substances to cope with loneliness. So, you're gaining a sense of community in your recovery and trying to find that path that works for you. But then the pandemic kind of put a halt to all of that and made it more difficult for everyone and how we were going to respond to our own challenges. How were we ever to know how to respond in something that nobody has ever experienced before?
So if addiction thrives in isolation, recovery thrives in community.
The pandemic then went on, I think, to teach us a few things that I'm hoping we will continue to keep in mind. One is the importance of community. What did we miss most? Being around other people, being outside with other people, for goodness sake, right? That's what we missed most. We lost that entirely for months. I hope that people understand that we need that. Like, we evolved to need. We survived as human beings because we formed communities that protected us.
As the world, the nation, and Northwest Ohio emerges from pandemic isolation, community reemerges. And so, hope remains. The Mental Health and Recovery Services Board of Lucas County approached Neighborhood Properties to help find the solution and create a connection. Together, they launched the Emotional Support Line.
And so we were there to meet the needs for people who called just needing somebody to talk to, and that was many. It was many people who didn't really have a subject in mind and didn't know what to do, and some even said, I've never done anything like this, I've never called anyone and spoken openly like this, but they just had there was something on their chest and they needed to release it.
And the truth is, it's a complicated mix that involves, in my opinion, community, involves breaking people from their isolation. It involves getting outside and being around other Americans, regardless of their political affiliation, and being, again, a country in which people kind of work together and in small, small ways. No magical fix, no silver bullet. Forget about that. That is where we got into problems initially. And so to me, that's how this feels to be shaping up.
You can do your part by disposing of unused and unwanted medications, by taking them to safe and secure drop boxes that are located throughout Lucas County. This reduces access and potential misuse. If you are in need of treatment services, call the Crisis Care Helpline at 419-904-CARE. For any crisis, you can also text 4HOPE to 741-741. This presentation is made possible by Harbor through the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board of Lucas County.